As is often true, I want to sort of start this particular podcast with a caveat, and it is that I realize that children are, I don't want to use the word stupid. I want to use a word like inexperienced or not particularly wise lots of the time. Some are more so than others, but I want to start from that perspective. I am going to talk about that today on the subject of family planning, which is what we're going to discuss on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics today. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Friday the 13th, that superstitious bad luck day for a lot of people of May of 2022. I hope you're having a good day today. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloutHub, on my Facebook page. That would be the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there, on Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com, on Minds, MINDS.com, primarily on the Kurt's Religion and Politics group there, on Parler, on Gab, or on Twitter, or wherever else you happen to be picking me up today. Again, the subject for the day is going to be family planning, and I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes so that you have some idea sort of what the baseline for what I'm going to be talking about today is. Am I confused, or is sex education of some sort taught in even the poorest of public schools? I get there are a lot of children whose parents do not teach them about the proverbial birds and bees. That said, I wonder how many people out there truly don't know what causes pregnancy and the remainder of procreation. I would bet the number is exceptionally small. And for those unaware, I somewhat do not count it reasonable for them to argue they didn't know sex would potentially result in pregnancy. Why? Because getting that close to another human being is not something one ought to do. I want to add a little statement that came to my mind. If you're unclothed as, say, a teenager near a teenager of the opposite, or anyone really of the opposite sex, without it being for a shower or something that is necessary, and you're that close to them, you're probably messing up. So because getting that close to another human being is not something one ought to do unless both are willing to spend a lifetime together. I consider my own actions in that regard to have been errant, and I've never had sex with anybody to whom I ultimately wasn't married. I did have sex before marriage, and I admit that, and I consider that to have been wrong on my part. Yes, I'm willing to cop to that. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done it, and yes, I should have taken responsibility, and I believe I did when I did that, but it was still wrong. I get there are hormonal considerations for young folks. I also understand that their parents cannot watch them every second of the day. Though I think most parents should try a whole lot harder to deal with their children, and particularly when they're young, but even when they're in the teenage years. All of this is lovely, but none of it somehow absolves the person having sex of responsibility for his or her actions. If you do things that may result in babies being conceived and, obviously, if left to develop, born, you should expect that as at least a possible outcome. That's part of family planning. If you're like me, once that baby comes into existence, and we're not talking at birth, short of miscarriage or some other unfortunate event, typically an accident, illness, disease, or similar, they're alive and need to be treated as such. You might guess that I'm saying at conception, when they're conceived. If you're not willing to do that, then I have a piece of advice. Stop acting in ways that may potentially produce a baby. Putting it simply, the point here is family planning is not aborting a baby. You can make an argument for contraception. For my part, I don't even buy that. But it's certainly not aborting a baby. That's not family planning. This is a large part of the reason most sane people cannot take entities like Planned Parenthood seriously. I know I can't. When you say abortion is the answer to that situation, I go, okay, no. They want you to wait until after you conceive or help to cause that to happen to consider whether or not it's wisdom for you to bring a life into the world. Who actually thinks that's reasonable? Do you? Do you think that's reasonable? I know I don't. Of course, there's an argument to be made for the idea that children conceived of people who cannot raise them can be adopted by those who can. With this, I entirely agree, by the way. I totally agree with that idea. In most cases, an unwanted pregnancy is a mild inconvenience, as difficult as it is, mind you, and I'm not saying it's easy, when compared to the termination of an innocent. The simple reality is, if a woman gets pregnant, and again, this is even true in cases of incest or rape, they can plan to have the baby adopted before they ever give birth. The idea that it's inconvenient or puts a hold on their life is, I'm sorry to say this, a lame one. I've had to do things that made it so my life was on hold for a time. Before, I've had to do them before, and where it's less likely the older I get, it's possible I'll have to do that sort of thing again. I'm going to put this out there again. Inconvenience is not a valid reason to commit murder. You're in my way. Bang. No. You can argue against it all you want, but that baby is alive. Taking that life without pretty strong cause cannot be construed in any way, in my view, but murder. I get that other people will argue with that. Do you have a problem with the idea that you have to carry a baby to term and give birth and then maybe take care of that little one, though again adoption is generally an option? Stop having unprotected sex, or really any at all. And I'm sorry, I don't care if what I've said hurts your feelings. Better that than you thinking it's okay to kill or cause to be killed an innocent baby. Okay, I'm done with my notes. Again, here we are at mic drop, right? Again, I try to do that every time I write my notes up. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm aiming for. But the point is simple in my view. And you can tell me that I'm out of my mind or there's something wrong with me. 1, that child that is in your womb is alive. Literally from the moment of conception as far as I'm concerned. Is it possible that the child will be taken via a miscarriage or some other unfortunate loss of life? Yes, it is. Is that a reasonable thing? No, but it's not one for which I can actually hold somebody at fault. That's going to happen sometimes. Miscarriages, diseases, illnesses, various things are going to cause that baby to die. Babies are going to be, come to a point where for whatever reason they're, quote, stillborn, though that happens less these days than ever before. But I'm just telling you, I get the risk to the mom thing, but the thing about it is, first of all, again, most instances, that's just not what's going on. And secondly, and more importantly, most of the time the risks, at least to some degree, can be mitigated so both the mother and the child or children will survive. Okay? It's just not reasonable for you to make the statement, because there's some risk to the mother or the child, we just do away with the child. That's just not reasonable. It's even less proper for you to say, oh, it would be very inconvenient for little Jane to have a baby, and therefore we're just going to abort the baby. That's not what we do. That's not what humans do. I'm going to say it again. People had to look after certain individuals, I think it was Christopher Reeve and Stephen Hawking and my friend Bob Jones, as I've said before, even though they were, quote, inviable, they weren't really viable. Right? In terms of their ability to survive on their own. And again, any baby who's born is in the same boat for a couple years, typically, maybe more. Right? They're not, quote, viable on their own accord. They have to have somebody else looking after them. That is how that works. So when you try to use viability as a marker, my first thing to say to you is no. Everybody is only viable within their circumstances. If you take me and put me at the bottom of the ocean with no special equipment, just me, I'm going to die. Viability is not something that you can argue for on some basis that the baby couldn't survive outside the womb by him or herself. It's just not a thing. And that's even less believable when, like I say, I know of someone who at 21 had a baby at 21 weeks, 6 days, I think it was, somewhere in that neighborhood, and the baby ended up, quote, being viable and survived and seems to be thriving very, very nicely at this point, seems to be intelligent and a nice young lady and all the rest. That makes viability even less of a thing. But the reality is, in order for you to even discuss the idea of viable, you have to talk about the idea of, is the baby living? And the point is, if you have sexual relations with somebody and it causes a baby to come into existence, take responsibility for the upbringing, the existence of that child. This is what I would say to you at this point in time. Okay. This has been the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Friday, the 13th of May of 2022. Again, that day that a lot of people are superstitious about, considering it a unlucky day. I don't consider that to be the truth. It is the beginning of the Sabbath at the end of the day today, at sundown today. For those of you that observe the Sabbath, I hope your Sabbath is a good one. Tomorrow then will be Saturday, the 14th of May of 2022. That will be the end of that Sabbath at sundown on Saturday. And I hope, again, that your Sabbath is good if you do, in fact, observe it. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloutHub, on my Facebook page. That would be the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there. On kurtzreligionandpolitics.locals.com, on minds.com, primarily on the Kurt's Religion and Politics group there. Periodically, you might see me post stuff on the Let's Talk Autism page, which is a good page if you're dealing with autism or want to know a little bit more about it. On Parler, on Gab, on Twitter, or wherever else you might be happening to hear or see me today. Subject for today has been family planning. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the cascade returns, and this has to do with this idea that the government at present is definitely planning for all of the bad things that are happening in the United States to occur. And I want to argue that there's maybe some reality and some truth to the idea that maybe that's not what at least some of the people involved are intending to have happen. Hope you're having a good day today. Hope everything is going well for you and continues to do so, obviously. And hopefully we will see you again on Saturday. That would be the 14th of May's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was created on Friday, the 13th of May of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching today's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. Don't forget to come back tomorrow to check out the next one. Remember, on various platforms, primarily Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, and CloutHub, and the audio podcast, you can subscribe to my content. For the audio podcast, you probably want to use Apple, Google, or Spotify. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. In order to find me on those platforms, you can go to the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, and CloutHub. You can also get to my content on Facebook by finding the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there. minds.com, where you will find me at the Kurt's Religion and Politics group. And Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com as well. You can look there. I post my daily video on various social media sites, really only about 3, Parler, Gab, and Twitter at present. I am at KP Schubert on each of them, and you can find me under them, and you can find the videos under me. You should be able to find my podcasts on Google and Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's also on podcasts.kpschubert.com. That's podcasts with an S. .kpschubert.com. If you're looking for me on various of the podcast sites, you probably want to search Kurt's Religion and Politics, not the Daily Summation. Keep in mind you can subscribe to my content on various places that I put it. All constructive feedback is welcome. You can like, dislike, add a rumble, or give whatever feedback is available on any of the platforms that you can do such things. You can also add a comment on what I put there. Unless you're advertising or doing something that I believe will harm others, I'll leave your comments out there even if I don't agree with or understand them. I will try to let you know I've seen them when possible and may reply if I feel it's reasonable, appropriate, and possible, of course. Thanks again for viewing this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Politics. Don't forget to come back again for tomorrow's